Buongiorno, buonasera, benvenuti amici. Welcome, my friends. This is Vincenzo from Fountain Pen Therapy. What I thought I'd do is, over the last, I would say, several months, I've ordered quite a bit of inks and a lot of shimmering inks. And in so doing, I began to question the methods that I was using for my swatching of inks, so that I keep track of them, and the paper that I was using, the journals, etc., etc. And I've been looking at that for a while, and I've ordered a few things, a few tools, and experimented with them. And I thought that I would share my thoughts with you. Now, I think that this is a comprehensive guide to swatching. Now, I've seen all kinds of other alternatives, okay? But essentially what I would like to do is provide you with my experience with different tools, and what I suggest ultimately is the ultimate tool, because you do want to get, I mean, you want to perhaps use different ways and different methods, but you want to get a workflow so that if you're doing the swatching, you're not constantly changing your methods, etc., etc., and you're getting some consistency in your swatching as well, so that for comparison purposes, your swatch book or your where you keep your swatches has some value for you, okay? And ultimately, the swatches, at least for me, is so that when it's time for me to ink a pen, I can go through the swatch journal or wherever I keep them and choose an ink for that pen on that particular day. Okay. Now, I'm not a graphic artist. I'm a lawyer by profession. This is just a side. It's just a passion, a hobby for me. So there may be all kinds of other things that, true artists or true graphic artists can suggest. And if they do, please don't hesitate, okay? I mean, I've actually seen, and I forget well, we'll get to back, because I do want to mention one particular YouTube channel uses a very unique method, and I want to make sure I get the name of the channel right. So I'll get back to you. We'll take a pause and we'll get back to you and give you the right name. That's the most unique way I've seen so far, and it's not included in this series of tools. Now, that's the first part of this video. The second part is, once we've gotten the swatch, I then had to find a way that I could, underneath the swatch, write the name of the ink. Okay. Now, yes, I could write the name of the ink with just an inked pen, with any ink in it, to keep track of the name. Okay. But I prefer, obviously, using the same ink that I'm swatching to write the name. And the problem is, you can't ink up a fountain pen, fill it up, or even ink it, and then, you want just one tool, or, what are the tools? And it's really a dip pen that you're looking for. So there's all kinds of dip pens out there, and I've tried them all. So we're going to look at all those dip pens that I've tried, and we'll come up with what I think is probably the best one. Okay? So that's where we're at. So let's start with the swatching tools. Now, at one point in my hobby collection, I ordered all these, what they refer to as automatic pens. And you can see that, and I wanted to show you the variety that I have. There are all kinds of different sizes. But, for example, these two, the logic here is that when you dip your pen, you, let me just, ink gets trapped in that area, and so it gives you a little bit of ink to work with. So you're not constantly dipping, okay? And, you could have a pen that's that thin, that thick, or, even thicker. Generally speaking, I think that this is a good size for the swatching. This one and this one, depending on how big your swatch is. So the first alternative that we'll test is this automatic pen system, okay? And again, I'm not a graphic artist, so I may even be using these things the wrong way, but just bear with me, okay? The next thing is these parallel pilot pens that come in different sizes, and for the swatching, you could use this 6.0, which is the biggest they have, okay? Now, this is meant to actually put in a cartridge, as you can see, and with the cartridge, you can use that, and you can use it as long as you want, but you don't want to waste a cartridge just to swatch one ink. So oftentimes I have in the past used this as a dip pen. It gets very messy, I can tell you right now, because ink gets trapped in there, and it's difficult because you want to be able to go from one ink to the other, wash it out quickly, and this one is less. It's a little more complicated because ink remains even though you wash it, and it gets complicated, so you're contaminating different colors. So it may not be the best method, but that's another one. The next, which I've seen very often, is the good old paintbrush. You swash it, and we'll see how that works. Then you have these dip pens with, and I forget what their names are, but with this bent nib, and again, the logic is that ink gets trapped in there, okay, in those, because there's two levels, okay, and it gives you enough ink to be able to do your swatch and even write. And I have all kinds of different sizes. I mean, I have a whole, and they're not expensive, you can get anything. You can get stubs in there, you can get very thin, you can get fine, and so I have all kinds of sizes. I've chosen the biggest folded one just because I think it would accommodate a swatch, okay? And the advantage of anything that's steel is that it mimics an actual nib, okay? So that's that one. We then have the swab. Now, you can go from a small Q-tip swab, which are less expensive, or you can go for these big ones. I've purchased on Amazon a bunch of them. Okay, you can get them like 100. So they're good. The problem with these things is that I've noticed is they're difficult to wash out. Okay, once you use them, you're pretty well done because ink does remain even though you're washing out, and I just don't trust reusing them. Okay, but again, a graphic artist can leave some comments below and tell me that I'm wrong, which would be great, so that if I could reuse these things, because otherwise it gets to be a very expensive venture. Okay, so that's that. The next one is the Kakamori brass pen, and I'll show you how this brass pen, first sight is, well, what are you doing, Vincent? Well, you'll see that depending on the angle that you use it, you can get very thick lines with this thing. So you could use this as both the swatcher and the writer. That's the advantage of this Kakamori nib. So that's why I thought I'd leave it in there. Then it's my favorite is these folded pens that I bought at Toronto Pen Company. They come in different sizes. I'm showing you two here, depending on how wide your swatch is. And again, the logic is that ink gets trapped in the fold there, and it gives you enough ink to do the swatching. I have a thinner one where you can actually write. So these are the folded pens. So why don't we take a break? I'll come back with my swatch book, and we'll test all of these with the same ink and see what kind of different results we get. We'll find a nice shimmering ink, and we'll see whether or not the shimmer comes through, or the shimmer and the sheen comes through. Okay, so we'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and you have on the screen I mentioned that other website, and I did want to get it right because she uses very ingenious. The site is Leanne Likes, and my congratulations to her. What she does, you see the stainless steel condiment cup? It's right there. What she does is that she just blobs a drop of ink on the paper, and then kind of uses the bottom part of that condiment cup to make her swatch, which becomes a perfect circle, and then she uses the kakimori brass nib to do the rest. So if we could take a look at how she does things, let me just she's unboxing here. Let me just get to a first swatch. Yeah, you see the way she does that? And it's a perfect circle. So I found that, and then she uses the kakimori nib, and you can tell. I think this woman must be a graphic artist. Otherwise, very well organized. She's clean. I mean, I'm all over the place. But having said that, to each his own, right? And and she tests them. So I just wanted to share that with you. I think that's another way that you could consider it. I just couldn't find a condiment cup in my kitchen, so otherwise I would have shown you. And maybe if I do, I'll come back to it. Okay, now I'm back. So the method or the workflow that I propose for this was essentially an experiment. First of all, the journal. The journal that I use, for those of you who have seen on my other videos, it's this ink journal done by a company by the name of Good Impressions, purchasable on Etsy site. I will leave the link in the description below. The beauty about this is, one, it's Tomoe River paper, so it really brings out the best in the swatches. And you have a place for the swatch. You have the brand, name of the ink, the name of the ink, and the date that you purchase it, and you can put 5 swatches on one page. It is Tomoe River paper, so there's a lot of see-through, so you may only be able to use one side. You could choose which side you prefer. But having said that, I think it's still a very fine way to keep your swatches, and they're all in little notebooks. You don't have these cards. It's all there. Now, I have one notebook where I've swatched my inks by company, by brand, if you will. But you can purchase different color covers for different color inks. So, for example, this orange one is for my orange inks. I've got blue, I've got green, I've got gray, I've got black, etc., etc. It's a little more expensive, but given that my ink collection is fairly extensive, and it keeps growing, fortunately or unfortunately, I have really one journal per color, and it really serves my purposes. So that's the journal that I propose that we use, okay? And in terms of the ink, I have 3 inks. The way I'm going to do this is, first of all, I'm going to test it. I know I spoke of earlier about a shimmering ink, but I think I'm going to do 3 types of inks. First one is this Shooting Star from Van Diemen's, which is an extremely shimmering ink. You can see here's my swatch on a separate swatch that I use for my video. As you can see, a lot of shimmer there. So that's the first one. The second one is Colorverse Supernova. I find that this ink, although it's standard ink, has some interesting sheen in it. So we'll see how that works out. And then I've chose this Manio ink, Haha, from Sailor, which are these dual shading, very light inks. So you can get 3 different varieties, if you will, of inks, and we'll swatch them with the different tools and see how that experiment works out. Okay, so that's and then of course the writing sample, well, we'll put it on an ordinary Tomoe River notebook. We'll just be giving you samples of the writing just to see which writing instrument is preferable in the circumstances. So that's it. So we'll be right back with the first part, which is the swatching. Okay, so let's look at the three inks that I'm using. The cotton swab gave me very little sheen. The paintbrush, same thing. There's a little bit of leakage there, a little bit of sheen on the leak here, but not much. The folded pen, you could see the sheen there. Same thing with the bent nib. You know, where there's more ink, you can definitely see the sheen. Parallel nib gave me virtually no sheen at all. Automatic pen gave me quite a bit. There you go. And the Kakimori brass nib, disappointing. I thought it would really give me more. It felt like it was dry when I was applying it. I knew there wasn't enough ink, and that could explain, but it's just the nature of the beast. So those are the results for the Sheen ink. Now let's take a look at the dual shade light ink from Mayo Sailor. Here again, the folded pen, you can see the variation. The parallel pen a little bit, but it kind of runs out of the ink as it goes along. The bent nib just as good as the folded pen. You could see that it gives me all the variation. The paintbrush, you can see at the beginning when it's full of ink, and then as I go down, it kind of loses traction, if you will. The automatic pen, again, because there's so much ink, difficult to put down, but you could see it gives me quite a swab there. The Kakimori, once again, very light. It comes down, I guess I think it's just a question of it not having enough ink, if you will, to do the swatch. And the cotton swab gives me a little bit of the variation, but not much. You could see that whatever is really steel or mimics best the pen, which is the folded pen and the bent nib and the automatic pen, you can see those are the ones that give you the best results, I think. However, the automatic pen is a little messy to apply. So my verdict for this type of ink would be either the bent nib or the folded pen, but maybe I'm just being biased. So that's my results for the dual shading inks. Let's look at my shimmering. The shimmering ink, a little bit different. They're pretty well all very performing except the parallel pen. Parallel pen, because there's a scratchy side to it, when you apply it, I think you're just brushing away that shimmer, and that's probably explains it. And it's a mess to apply in any event. The cotton swab, surprisingly enough, gave me good results, and so did the paintbrush. You see that it kind of runs a little bit out of steam as it gets to the end here. When there's no more, the wetness kind of runs out. Same thing with the paintbrush. Whereas the automatic pen, the Kakimori, very performing, surprisingly enough. And the folded pen and the folded nib, it's pretty consistent. Given that it holds a lot of ink, it performs fairly well. Again, if there's going to be a verdict, again, I'm very biased. I think the folded pen does the trick for me. It's easily washable. It gives me the results that I want consistently. The Kakimori, unfortunately, I'm not sure. I don't like the results it gave me with the ordinary Sheen ink and with the shimmering ink, and the dual ink. So I think my verdict is that I would stick to the folded pen. Folded pen is my. I marked here folded nib. It should in fact read bent nib, but of course we understand each other. Okay, good. So those are the three results with the three inks. That's it for my swatching. Okay, now we're going to be reviewing the different tools, or in effect the tools here are dip pens, that one can use to complement the swatch with an actual title of the brand of the ink and the name of the ink, so that it's an identification tag, if you will, for the swatch itself. And the game, of course, is to be able to quickly you know, if we're swatching 4 or 5 inks, you want to be able to just with a bottle or a jar of water be able to wash out your nib and go from one ink to another without having to re-ink a fountain pen for simply writing 3 or 4 words. Okay, that's the objective. So I have the standard glass pen. I have 2. They look like glass pens, but they're not. They're actually, the tips are plastic. I have one that I just purchased, which is thinner, and one that's a little bit thicker. I would say this gives me a fine line, this gives me a medium line. So we're going to try both. This is the automatic pen. You've seen that, except this is one of the thinner ones. Okay. I then have the Okoro Sailor nib, and this is a stub, and we'll see how that works. I have a dip pen, a standard dip pen, but with a, with cavities here, which is stub. So I've taken one that's a stub, one of the smaller stubs, as a matter of fact. I have my parallel pen, which is, this one is the smallest of the gang, if you will. Okay, so it gives me a stub line. And then, of course, I have my infamous Kumiri that I just love the look and feel of this nib, and I just can't get used to it. Let's hope it doesn't disappoint me. So those are the different options that I propose, and we'll actually take a writing sample and see which ones I recommend. Okay, let's get to work. Okay, so the first one here is my glass pen. And I will mark here real glass. Performs really well, I got to tell you. The problem I have with the glass pens generally, or de-styled glass pens, is these huge 2 balls at the end here that I just cannot get used to for the life of me. It's just so uncomfortable. If I take the pen this high, it just doesn't feel right. So what I've done is I've ordered what they refer to as a vintage glass pen. I don't know why, but it seems to be the popular name, vintage glass pen. I've ordered it on eBay, and it actually has a pen barrel. So we'll see how that works out. But otherwise, this one's nice and smooth, by the way. I had to do some work on it, but it's really, really nice. Performs very well. The next will be my plastic nibs. Plastic glass nibs. So plastic glass. This is the fine. Again, because of those swirls, you can big mileage. This one, the next one will be same company, just a thicker nib. Plastic glass. This one I refer to as the medium. Again, the swirls carry a lot of ink, should you require it. Next on my list, and this one is always an adventure, it's the automatic pen. Now I'm trying to put not much ink, otherwise it causes a mess, but let's see how this works. Okay, maybe we'll turn it around. Yeah, there you see it. It just comes out at the initial stages really, really thick. Automatic pen. There's just too much ink in that cavity for it to serve my purpose. You see the ink right there? And I've emptied it out. And it's very difficult to predict how much. Look at the blob it left me here. So, and in all fairness to this automatic pen, maybe this is not what it was meant to do, so But it's an alternative that I explored, and I give you my thoughts. This is the Akoro Sailor. Yeah. Here again, now, you know, it gives me lobs, and then it just runs out on me. You see, it runs out. So I can't trust that this nib will actually be able to give me a clear handwriting, and that it will last for, you know, a look at this. It's got nothing left here, so it means I have to re-ink it. And you know, if I get a long brand name or a long ink name, it's just not going to suffice. I would have to dip it 2 or 3 times. It's just not the it's not the objective, obviously. This is just my dip stub pen. Keep going for a while here. This is really nice. I got to tell you, spoils alert, this is my favorite of the gang, and I'll explain that in a few seconds. But so far, I think that's the one I'm going to go with from now on. This is the parallel pen, and this time it worked out really well. Problem with this one is that I'm not sure how it will react to any given shot. Now, in all fairness to it, you know, maybe this is not what it's meant to do, you know. And the other problem, I remind you, is that when I wash that out, it doesn't completely wash out because ink penetrates into this barrel here. And when I need to use it for my next ink, you know, the ink in here will contaminate it, or, you know, not, it will contaminate the other dip. So I, as much as I like these parallel pens, I don't think it would be my go-to pen. Lastly, my Kokimori. Let's just see how this guy writes. Well, this time it worked out. It's always a living adventure with my Kokimori. I really like this pen. I'm going to give it one. It's really expensive. I think the nib and the barrel cost me almost $100 Canadian. So I'm going to give this thing all the chances it needs. Eventually, from what I hear, the more you write with it, the nib kind of fine-tunes itself. So I'm going to give it a go as much as I can. Right now I'm struggling with it, but look, I haven't given up. So that's it. So as you can see, those are all my results there. The reason why I think I'm going to go with the Stipula stub pen is, one, it writes extremely well. It gathers, or it conserves just enough ink for me to do what I need to do. It doesn't blob on me like my automatic and my Akoro or the parallel. And it gives me the thickness that I require, and it mimics really well a stub pen. The reason why I like stub pen for swatching is that it will give me a very clean but smooth but thick line, so that I could see how that ink reacts with actual writing. Not only do I have a swatch, but that gives me an indication, but the writing will give me an indication as well. Now you can't see it maybe on the camera, but that the word stub is already got sheen on it. So a little bit just like automatic pen. Automatic pen has got sheen on it as well, just because it's so thick. Okay, but I cannot use that because I don't know how it's going to come out. It might just give me a big blob, and it'll just mess up my swatch. So there you have it. That's my recommendation. I think I'm going to struggle with my Kokimori, keep going with it. Hopefully it'll work out, and use my dip stub pen as my go-to. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, experiment, have fun. It's fountain pen therapy. Take care, folks.